Have you ever caught someone talking about you, thinking you couldn't understand? Well, my boss made that mistake, and it cost her company $250 million. If you enjoy stories of workplace justice, hit that like button and subscribe for more. The air conditioning in Vertex Solutions conference room was cranked too high, as usual. I pulled my blazer tighter around my shoulders while discreetly checking the time on my watch. 9 minutes until the biggest presentation of my career. Natalie, did you bring the revised projections? James, our head of finance, was frantically flipping through his folder. Already loaded on the server and backed up on my drive, I replied, sliding him a printed copy. Highlighted the key differences from last quarter. At 28, I wasn't the youngest executive at Vertex, but I had climbed the corporate ladder faster than most. 5 years of late nights, canceled vacations, and proving myself repeatedly had earned me the position of Director of Strategic Partnerships. Today, I was leading our team in the final presentation to secure a $250 million partnership with Belridge International, a Fortune 500 company that would transform our mid-sized tech firm into a major industry player. Diana Crawford, my direct manager and our chief operating officer, swept into the room with her usual flurry of energy, designer heels clicking aggressively against the tile floor. At 45, Diana was what business magazines called a powerhouse executive. Brilliant, ruthlessly efficient, and terrifying to anyone who didn't meet her exacting standards. Team, we have 7 minutes. Diana's voice was clipped as she surveyed the room. Natalie, a word? I followed her into the hallway, mentally preparing for last-minute changes to the presentation I'd been perfecting for weeks. The Belridge team is running late. Their flight was delayed. They've pushed us back an hour, Diana said, checking her immaculate manicure. Also, they're bringing their new VP of Global Operations, Carlos Mendoza, Hispanic MIT graduate previously with Goldman Sachs. I've heard good things about him, I nodded. He's supposedly driving their expansion into South American markets. Diana's eyebrow arched slightly. Just stick to the script. I'll handle any questions about international scaling. What she didn't know, what almost no one at Vertex knew, was that I had grown up bilingual. My mother was from Argentina, and while I had my father's last name and features that didn't immediately suggest my Hispanic heritage, Spanish had been my first language. I'd spent every summer until college with my grandparents in Buenos Aires. My fluency wasn't something I hid, but in the predominantly white upper management circles of Vertex, it had simply never come up. When the Belridge team finally arrived, it was with the controlled chaos of important people on a tight schedule. Diana was in her element, all warm smiles and firm handshakes as she greeted their CEO, Jonathan Wells, and his team of executives. Carlos Mendoza hung back slightly, observing. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with intelligent eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they landed on. When Diana introduced me, he switched from English to Spanish without hesitation. Es un placer conocerte. He oído que has estado liderando este proyecto. It's a pleasure to meet you. I've heard you've been leading this project. I smiled and responded in fluent Spanish. El placer es mío. Estamos muy entusiasmados con esta asociación potencial. The pleasure is mine. We're very excited about this potential partnership. The brief flash of surprise in his eyes was gratifying, but the real shock came from Diana. For a split second, her carefully composed expression faltered, revealing something close to alarm before she quickly recovered. I didn't realize you spoke Spanish, Natalie, she said with a tight smile. My mother is Argentine, I explained simply, before turning back to Carlos to continue our conversation about the presentation. The meeting itself went brilliantly. Our team had prepared meticulously, and the Belridge executives were clearly impressed by the data and projections we presented. I fielded questions confidently, occasionally switching to Spanish when Carlos or another bilingual executive from their team asked something in their native language. After the formal presentation, we broke into smaller groups for more detailed discussions. I was deep in conversation with 2 of their tech leads when I overheard Diana speaking to Jonathan Wells in lowered tones near the refreshment table. We've got this in the bag, she was saying. Natalie did a decent job with the presentation, though I had to simplify some of the more complex aspects of the integration timeline for her. She's not quite ready for this level of partnership management, but I'll be overseeing everything personally. My cheeks burned, but I maintained my composure and continued my conversation. Diana had a habit of taking credit for her subordinates' work, but this was blatant misrepresentation. I had developed the entire integration timeline myself, after weeks of collaboration with our engineering team. As the Belridge team prepared to leave, Diana pulled Carlos aside. I was gathering my materials nearby, not intentionally eavesdropping, but close enough to hear when Diana, apparently assuming I couldn't understand, switched to Spanish. Entre nosotros, she said in decent but heavily accented Spanish. Estoy aliviada de que hables inglés también. Natalie es buena, pero no confiaría en ella para manejar las complejidades de un acuerdo internacional. Estas chicas jóvenes están ansiosas pero carecen de experiencia real. Yo personalmente supervisaré todos los aspectos de esta asociación. Between us, I'm relieved you speak English so well. Natalie is good, but I wouldn't trust her to handle the complexities of an international deal. These young girls are eager but lack real experience. I will personally oversee all aspects of this partnership. Carlos looked uncomfortable but nodded politely. I pretended to be absorbed in my tablet, my face carefully neutral despite the fury building inside me. The casual dismissal stung, but it wasn't surprising. Diana had been subtly undermining me for months, taking credit for my successes while ensuring I knew my place in the hierarchy. What infuriated me most was her assumption that I couldn't understand her, that she could safely disparage me in another language, right in front of me, without consequences. When Carlos looked in my direction, our eyes met briefly. The slight grimace that crossed his face told me he suspected I had understood every word. As everyone filed out, Diana placed a hand on my shoulder. Great job today, Natalie. I think we impressed them. Let me handle the follow-up communications. I smiled tightly. Of course. That evening, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine, staring at the city lights outside my window. 5 years of dedication to Vertex, countless late nights, 3 major partnerships I'd secured that had boosted our company's valuation significantly. And still, Diana saw me as just una chica joven, a young girl, who couldn't be trusted with real responsibility. I had a decision to make. I could confront Diana directly, risking my position at Vertex. I could go over her head to our CEO, which might address this specific situation but would permanently damage my relationship with Diana. Or I could do something else entirely. My phone buzzed with a text message. An unknown number. This is Carlos Mendoza. Got your contact from your colleague James. Impressive presentation today. I sensed there might be some internal dynamics at play. If you're free for coffee tomorrow, I'd like to discuss some aspects of the partnership directly. I stared at the message for a long moment, then slowly began to type my reply. The cafe Carlos suggested was in a quiet corner of downtown, far enough from both our offices to avoid accidental run-ins with colleagues. I arrived 15 minutes early, a habit my father had instilled in me that had served me well in the corporate world. Carlos arrived precisely on time, dressed more casually than yesterday in dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt. "Thank you for meeting me," he said after ordering coffee for both of us. "I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I wanted to speak with you directly." "Not at all," I replied. "I appreciate the opportunity." He took a sip of his coffee before continuing. "Your presentation yesterday was excellent. Very thorough. But I sensed some tension between you and your COO. I considered my response carefully. Professional suicide was not on my agenda today. Diana and I have different management styles, I said diplomatically. She's been an important mentor. Carlos gave me a knowing look. "Natalie, I'm going to be direct. You understood everything she said to me in Spanish yesterday, didn't you?" I met his gaze steadily. "Yes." He nodded, looking troubled. "I thought so. I apologize for not saying something in the moment. It put me in an awkward position." "You have nothing to apologize for," I assured him. "It wasn't your comment." Still, I should have corrected her assumption. The truth is, you're the main reason our team is excited about this partnership. Your reputation precedes you. The Meyerson deal last year? The integration was seamless, and the work you did with Tech Dynamics was impressive. I couldn't hide my surprise. Those were indeed my projects, but Diana had been front and center in all the public-facing communications about them. I do my research, Carlos explained with a small smile. Before committing $250 million, I like to know who's really driving success. We spent the next hour discussing the partnership in detail. Carlos was sharp and insightful, asking questions that challenged my thinking in the best possible way. By the time we finished our second cups of coffee, I felt a growing sense of professional respect for him. There's something else I wanted to discuss, Carlos said finally, his tone becoming more serious. Belridge is expanding our North American operations. We're creating a new division focused on strategic partnerships and integration. We need someone with vision to build it from the ground up. I felt my pulse quicken slightly. Sounds like an exciting opportunity. It is. Carlos slid a folder across the table. This is just preliminary information, but we'd like you to consider joining Belridge as our new VP of Partnership Integration. The role would report directly to me. I opened the folder and quickly scanned the first page. The compensation package made my eyes widen. It was nearly double my current salary, with stock options that could be worth significantly more if the company continued its growth trajectory. This is unexpected, I managed. Take some time to think about it, Carlos said. We don't need an answer immediately, but I want you to know that the offer is serious, and it exists independently of the partnership with Vertex. Whether that deal goes forward or not, we want you on our team. As I walked back to my office, my mind raced with possibilities. The Belridge offer was tempting. More money, more responsibility, and clearly more recognition for my abilities. But leaving Vertex felt like giving up. I had invested so much of myself in the company, and despite Diana's behavior, I had built strong relationships throughout the organization. When I returned to the office, I was immediately summoned to Diana's office. "Where have you been?" she demanded without preamble. "We had the post-presentation analysis meeting at 11. "I had a follow-up meeting with Carlos Mendoza from Belridge," I replied calmly. Diana's expression darkened. "You had what? Without clearing it with me first?" "He requested a direct meeting to discuss some technical aspects of the integration," I explained, keeping my voice level. I didn't want to miss the opportunity to address his concerns. What concerns? There were no concerns raised in yesterday's meeting. Diana's voice had taken on the dangerous edge I recognized as a warning sign. Not concerns, exactly. Just some clarification on implementation timelines. Diana leaned forward, her manicured fingernails tapping an irritated rhythm on her desk. "Natalie, I'm the point person on this deal. All communications with Belridge need to go through me. I can't have you freelancing and potentially undermining our negotiating position." The irony of her accusation wasn't lost on me. "Of course, it won't happen again." "Good." She sat back, visibly calming herself. "Now, I need you to prepare an adjusted timeline for the first phase of integration. Jonathan mentioned they might want to accelerate the process." As I turned to leave, Diana added, "Oh, and I need the revised Belridge presentation for the board by tomorrow morning. Add an executive summary, something simple they can grasp quickly." I nodded and left her office, my decision suddenly becoming clearer. That evening, I called my mother. We spoke in Spanish, as we always did, the familiar rhythms of my first language bringing comfort as I described the situation. "Mamá, no sé qué hacer. La oferta de Belridge es increíble, pero dejar Vertex se siente como una derrota. Mom, I don't know what to do. The Belridge offer is incredible, but leaving Vertex feels like defeat." My mother, ever pragmatic, didn't hesitate. "Natalie, sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. This woman doesn't value you. Why give her more of your talent?" "He invertido tanto en Vertex." "I've invested so much in Vertex." "Y ellos han invertido en ti?" "And have they invested in you?" Her question hung in the air, demanding honest reflection. Had Vertex, had Diana, ever truly invested in me the way I had in them? After we hung up, I opened my laptop and began composing 2 emails. The first was to our CEO, Mark Winters, requesting a meeting first thing tomorrow morning. The second was to Carlos Mendoza, asking for 48 hours to consider his offer. Then I opened a new document and began to write. If I was going to make a decision that would alter the course of my career, I needed absolute clarity on what had brought me to this point. By midnight, I had a plan. Mark Winters' office occupied the corner of Vertex's top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. At 7:30 a.m., he was already at his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed documents. "Natalie, come in," he greeted me warmly. "You said it was important?" "It is." I took a seat across from him, placing a folder on his desk. "I wanted to discuss the Belridge partnership." Mark removed his glasses, giving me his full attention. "I heard the presentation went exceptionally well. Diana seemed confident we're on track." "The presentation did go well," I agreed. "But there's something you should know." I explained my meeting with Carlos Mendoza, carefully excluding the job offer but including Diana's reaction when I told her about the meeting. Then, taking a deep breath, I recounted what Diana had said in Spanish, both to Carlos and her earlier comments to Jonathan Wells. Mark's expression remained neutral, but I noticed his jaw tightening. "You're certain about this translation?" "Spanish was my first language," I confirmed. "I'm completely fluent." He nodded slowly. "I see. And why are you bringing this to me now?" "Because the Belridge partnership is too important for personal politics," I said firmly. "They're a $250 million opportunity for Vertex. But more than that, they represent the kind of long-term strategic partner that could transform our position in the market. I don't want Diana's misconceptions about my capabilities to jeopardize that." Mark was silent for a long moment, studying me with an intensity that made me nervous despite my preparation. "What would you like me to do with this information, Natalie?" I opened the folder I had brought and removed several documents. "These are the complete partnership materials I've developed over the past 3 months. The integration timeline, technical specifications, staffing plans, and projected ROI models. All created by me and my team, with minimal input from Diana." Mark glanced through the papers, his eyebrows rising slightly. "I'm not asking you to take sides in a personal disagreement," I continued. "I'm asking you to ensure that Vertex puts its best foot forward with Belridge. The partnership is too valuable to risk because one executive doesn't want to acknowledge the contributions of her team." "And what exactly are you proposing?" "I should be the lead on this partnership," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Diana can remain involved at the executive level, but the day-to-day management and implementation should be my responsibility." Mark leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "That's a significant ask, Natalie. Diana is our COO. I understand that. But this isn't about titles or hierarchy. It's about who can best serve the company's interests in this specific situation." Mark was silent again, longer this time. Finally, he nodded. "I'll consider it. In the meantime, continue preparing for the next phase of discussions with Belridge." I left his office feeling both relieved and anxious. I had said my piece, but I had no illusion that challenging Diana would be without consequences. Throughout the day, I immersed myself in work, finalizing the board presentation Diana had requested and addressing some technical questions that had come in from the Belridge team. I was so focused that I almost missed the calendar notification that appeared on my screen at 3 p.m. Executive Committee, Special Session, 3:30 p.m. I hadn't been invited, which wasn't unusual for EC meetings, but the timing seemed significant. As 3:30 approached, I found myself unable to concentrate, wondering what was being discussed behind closed doors. At 4:45, my phone rang. It was Mark's assistant, asking me to come to the conference room immediately. When I arrived, I found Mark, Diana, and our chief legal officer, Patricia Harding, seated at the table. Diana's expression was thunderous. Mark's was unreadable. Patricia, ever the lawyer, maintained her professional poker face. "Natalie, please sit down." Mark said, gesturing to an empty chair. I complied, my heart racing despite my efforts to appear calm. I've been discussing some concerns with Diana and Patricia, Mark began. Specifically about your unauthorized meeting with Carlos Mendoza and some misunderstandings about your role in the Belridge partnership. Diana cut in, her voice razor-sharp. You went behind my back to the CEO. After I explicitly told you that all communications with Belridge needed to go through me. I did, I acknowledged, meeting her gaze. Because you misrepresented my work and my capabilities to the Belridge team, in a language you assumed I couldn't understand. That's not... Mark held up a hand, silencing Diana. I've asked Patricia to join us because this situation has implications for how we structure the Belridge deal moving forward. Diana has expressed concerns about your ability to lead such a significant partnership, while you've made a compelling case for your central role in developing the relationship. Patricia cleared her throat. From a legal and organizational perspective, there are several ways we could approach this. However, before we discuss those options, I think we need clarity on one point. She turned to me. Natalie, are you committed to staying with Vertex and seeing this partnership through? The question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on standing up for myself that I hadn't fully decided what to do about Carlos's offer. I've given 5 years to Vertex, I said carefully. I've led 3 major partnerships that have significantly contributed to our growth. I've built a team that consistently delivers results. My commitment to this company has never been in question. That's not an answer, Diana said coldly. I'm committed to seeing the Belridge partnership succeed, I replied, looking directly at Mark. Whether that happens with me at Vertex or elsewhere depends on whether I'm valued here. Mark's eyes narrowed slightly. Elsewhere? Have you received an offer, Natalie? The room fell silent. I could feel the weight of the moment, knowing my next words would determine not just my future, but potentially the future of the Belridge partnership as well. Yes, I said simply. From Belridge. Diana's laugh was sharp and disbelieving. You expect us to believe Belridge offered you a job after one presentation and a coffee meeting? I reached into my bag and slid Carlos's folder across the table. VP of Partnership Integration, reporting directly to Carlos Mendoza. Patricia picked up the folder, reviewing its contents with a lawyer's thoroughness before passing it to Mark. His expression remained neutral, but I could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. When did you receive this offer? Mark asked. Yesterday, during my meeting with Carlos. And you didn't think to mention this critical information when we spoke this morning? His tone was more curious than accusatory. I wanted our conversation to focus on what's best for Vertex, not on my personal opportunities, I explained. The offer from Belridge exists regardless of what happens with the partnership. Carlos made that clear. Diana was seething now. This is a clear conflict of interest. She's been negotiating for herself while representing Vertex. I haven't accepted their offer, I countered. And I haven't negotiated anything for myself. Carlos approached me, not the other way around. Mark held up a hand again, silencing both of us. Patricia, what's your take on this situation? Our CLO adjusted her glasses thoughtfully. From a strictly legal perspective, Natalie hasn't violated any non-compete or confidentiality provisions. She disclosed the offer promptly, and there's no evidence she's used her position at Vertex inappropriately. She turned to me. That said, Natalie, you're now in a position where any further involvement with the Belridge negotiations could be perceived as compromised. I nodded, having anticipated this. I understand. Mark was quiet for a moment, then said, I'd like to speak with Natalie alone, please. Diana started to protest, but Mark's expression stopped her. She and Patricia left the room, Diana's parting glare promising this wasn't over. When the door closed, Mark sighed heavily. This is quite a situation you've created, Natalie. With respect, sir, I didn't create it. I'm responding to it. He acknowledged this with a tilt of his head. Fair enough. So, what do you want? Really? I took a deep breath. I want recognition for my work. I want opportunities commensurate with my abilities. I want to be valued for what I bring to the table, not dismissed because I'm younger or female, or don't fit someone else's idea of what leadership looks like. And you don't believe you can get those things at Vertex? I believe I've been trying for 5 years, with mixed results, I said honestly. Mark tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the table. The Belridge offer is impressive. I couldn't match it even if I wanted to. It's not just about the money. No, I know it isn't. He looked at me appraisingly. You know, I see a lot of myself in you, Natalie. The drive, the attention to detail, the strategic thinking. When I was coming up, I had a boss like Diana. Brilliant but territorial, quick to take credit, slow to give it. I remained silent, sensing he had more to say. I stayed and fought for my place. Eventually, I outlasted him. Mark shrugged. But that was a different time, a different industry. The question is, what serves you best now? Fighting for recognition here, or starting fresh somewhere your talents are already recognized? What serves Vertex best? I countered. He smiled slightly. Always thinking of the company. That's admirable. The smile faded. But let me be frank. If you leave for Belridge, the partnership will likely fall through. Diana doesn't have your grasp of the technical integration, and rebuilding those relationships would take months we don't have. I know. So you have leverage, Mark stated matter-of-factly. What do you intend to do with it? I had been thinking about this question all night. I want to lead the Belridge partnership from start to finish. No oversight from Diana, reporting directly to you. And afterward, I want a clear path to advancement. Not promises, but concrete steps with timelines and benchmarks. Mark considered this. And if I agree to those terms, you'll decline Belridge's offer? I'll consider declining it, I corrected. But I'll need those terms in writing. He laughed unexpectedly. You really are good at this, aren't you? His expression grew serious again. If I agree, Diana will be furious. She might even resign. That's a risk, I acknowledged. But is keeping Diana happy worth losing both the Belridge partnership and the executive who made it happen? The question hung in the air between us. Finally, Mark stood up. I need to make some calls. We'll continue this discussion tomorrow morning. I nodded, gathering my things. As I reached the door, Mark called after me. Natalie, regardless of how this plays out, I want you to know that your work has been noticed, not just by Belridge, but by me as well. I thanked him and left, feeling oddly lighter despite the uncertainty ahead. That evening, I received a text from Carlos. Any thoughts on our offer? I replied, still considering. Need a bit more time. His response came quickly. Take the time you need, but we're excited about the possibility of having you on our team. I set my phone down and looked out at the city lights, weighing my options. Vertex had been my professional home for 5 years. I had grown there, built relationships, achieved successes. But I had also hit walls, Diana being the most formidable among them. Belridge offered a fresh start, with better compensation and a clearer path to advancement. But would I be running away from a challenge rather than confronting it? My mother's words echoed in my mind. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. To my surprise, Mark was already in the conference room, along with Patricia and, most shockingly, Jonathan Wells, the CEO of Belridge. Natalie, thank you for joining us, Mark said, his tone formal but not unfriendly. I've been having some productive conversations with Jonathan about the partnership and other matters. Jonathan Wells smiled at me. Carlos speaks very highly of you, Natalie. He's convinced you're exactly what Belridge needs. Thank you, I replied, uncertain where this was heading. Mark gestured for me to sit. We have a proposal for you. Or rather, proposals, plural. Patricia slid 2 folders across the table. Option A is from Vertex. Option B is a revised offer from Belridge, which Jonathan brought with him this morning. I opened the Vertex folder first. Inside was a detailed agreement outlining exactly what I had asked for. Complete control over the Belridge partnership, reporting directly to Mark, and a clearly defined advancement path including a VP position within 18 months, contingent on specific performance metrics. The Belridge folder contained an even more generous offer than Carlos had initially presented, with additional stock options and a signing bonus. Both are compelling, I said carefully. Both companies want you, Jonathan said simply. The question is where you feel you can make the greatest impact and find the greatest satisfaction. I looked at Mark. Diana? I spoke with her last night, he replied. She's not happy, but she's a professional. She understands what's at stake. What he didn't say, but I understood, was that Diana had been given an ultimatum. Accept the new arrangement or face the consequences of losing both me and the Belridge deal. I need a few minutes, I said. Of course, Mark nodded. Take all the time you need. I stepped out into the hallway, my mind racing. Both offers represented victory, acknowledgement of my value and vindication after Diana's dismissive comments. Either way, I would no longer be undermined or have my accomplishments minimized. But which path was right for me? At Vertex, I had history, knowledge of the systems and culture, and existing relationships that would help me succeed. I had also proven myself repeatedly, earning this opportunity through persistent excellence. At Belridge, I would have a fresh start, free from any lingering politics with Diana. I would be hired specifically for my skills and potential, not fighting to have them recognized. As I weighed my options, I realized something important. This decision wasn't about Diana anymore. It wasn't about proving her wrong or getting revenge for her dismissive comments. It was about my future, my career, and where I could best apply my talents. I returned to the conference room, my decision made. I've made my choice, I announced, looking between Mark and Jonathan. And I want to thank you both for these opportunities. I picked up one of the folders, the weight of it representing not just a job offer, but a new chapter in my professional journey. This is where I belong.